Welcome to IVF This, episode 109, The Infertility Tipping Point. Welcome to IVF This. I'm your host, Emily Ginn. After 10 years of primary and secondary infertility due to both male and female factor infertility, I am now the mother to 3 beautiful miracles. I am married to my favorite person in the world. I'm a social worker, a life coach, and an IVF warrior. I'm here to teach you how to manage your mind and emotions during your IVF journey, to break free from anxiety and regain control of your life, even in the midst of infertility. I'm going to teach you how to say IVF this to how we think about, talk about, and experience infertility. Let's go. Hello, my beautiful friends. I hope you're all doing so well today. I am very excited to talk with you guys. I do have a couple of listener reviews, I call them listener love, that I want to share with you all before I get to kind of today's topic. But they're both from Audible. Yes, IVF This is available on Audible. So the first review is anonymous, but it says, I'm starting IVF for the first time soon, and I'm concerned about how it will affect my mental health. I'm so glad that I found this podcast and that I know that I will go back and listen to some of my favorite episodes when I'm struggling. Well, I'm so glad that you found the podcast, and I wish you nothing but love and luck on this IVF journey. I will say that I'm very glad that you're looking for support as you're doing this. I don't think that many, if any of us, give ourselves credit for cultivating, nurturing, seeking out supports. And that's not for nothing. This is an act of self-love, of taking care of yourself. It shows that you are resourceful and willing to learn things to better take care of yourself, right? So when your brain goes to catastrophizing, I want you to remind yourself that you do know how to take care of yourself, that you've done it time and time again, or that you are learning how to better take care of yourself. And as always, I want you to give yourself credit, even if it's in the past and it is something that maybe you would have never acknowledged. I want you to acknowledge it. Allow yourself to kind of acknowledge it and really accept that you do know everything you need to know to take care of yourself. The second one comes from a woman named Jessica, and she said, I could write a more lengthy review, but I won't. I will just say that she is fabulous and professional and seems to have a very good heart too. She is so good and professional and gives excellent interviews with some awesome topics. She even discusses things that we're not supposed to say. Like in sex ed in school, they taught us lies. Refreshing, empowering, and friendly. She gives hope to all the moms who have gone through IVF and women who are going to go through it and people in general. I'm happy I found this sweet podcast, and I hope you are too. I love this so much. I want your lengthy review, Jessica. I want the length. No, but I do just want to say both for taking the time to rate and review the podcast. It really does mean a lot to me, not just because I enjoy hearing that you guys are enjoying the podcast or that you find it beneficial, but really ratings and especially the reviews on the platforms that have them, Apple, Audible, maybe Stitcher, I'm not sure. But I know that on Spotify, you can only rate but not review. Anyway, the more ratings and the reviews that a podcast have, the more it's what's called discoverable. So that means that more people can find it. So please share the podcast. If the platform has a rating or review system, please share your thoughts there. Let's get the word out that you can do infertility and IVF treatments differently, that you don't have to be at the mercy of this process or your emotions, that you can learn how to take care of yourself during arguably one of the most stressful times of your life. And if you can learn how to take care of yourself now, man, that ripple effect will last your entire life. It's amazing. All right, let's get to the topic at hand, which is the infertility tipping point. So I've been working on expanding some of my social media stuff and my team. And I do want to stop and say a massive, massive thank you to my team. I have an incredible and wonderful producer, Anthony, who has been with me since episode 1. He's the reason that this podcast sounds as polished and professional as it does, as Jessica noted. He's responsible for all of that. I am basically a chaos goblin that puts relatively coherent, cogent words together, and then he makes them sound super professional and polished. I also have Ella, who, bar none, is one of the most lovely individuals I have ever had the pleasure of working with. She takes all of the stuff that I write and she crafts the social media posts out of them. Again, she has to take the work of this chaos goblin and make it beautiful and polished and everything. And I'm just very lucky to have them. Anyway, back on the topic. As I've been kind of building out my social media stuff and we're expanding on that stuff, I've been watching more infertility and IVF related social media posts and channels and stuff like that. So I've been thinking more and more about the difference in the mindset for people who choose to work with me and those who choose not to work with me. And not from a place of judgment, never, but from a place of curiosity. Like whether you choose to work with me or any mental health professional during this time, it's irrelevant. I think what's important is to understand the mindset of someone who decides that they want a different experience on this journey. So a couple of caveats before I get started. I do not want to minimize the privilege and the access that one needs in order to have access to the opportunity to work with a coach or a therapist, right? That's not accessible to everyone, whether logistically, financially, anything like that. In addition, I realize that coaching is not paid for by insurance. So it's an additional expense on top of whatever expense you might be incurring from fertility treatments. So when I talk about the mindset of people who actively pursue coaching or therapy, mindfulness, thought work, whatever it is, I'm not speaking about those with the financial means to pay for it. I'm talking about the person who is working a second job at Starbucks to help pay for IVF coverage. She listens to the podcast and actively journals a couple of minutes a day. She's not dropping money or anything like that, but she's utilizing what she does have access to, right? So that's what I'm referring to. You do not have to pay for coaching or go to therapy to change your experience of this journey. You don't have to invest in the perfect journal or the perfect pen or a million books or extravagant things to change your experience of this journey. But those that do have hit the infertility tipping point. A tipping point is a small series of events or incidents that becomes significant enough to cause larger, more permanent change or important change. The tipping point is when you've decided you have to do something or that you're going to do something about what you have, what you're experiencing, what's going on. It's deciding to take action, even if you don't know exactly what action to take. And even if the actions you take are going to have the outcome you want, right? The tipping point is when we decide we aren't going to settle or sit on the sidelines and watch our lives go by, even while we're going through fertility treatments. Even when it feels like we've ostensibly given control over to IVF and the entire process. So what I mean by the infertility tipping point is that some of the IVFers will notice themselves feeling sad, lonely, helpless, heartless, or disheartened when they think about how their lives look right now. Super common. Those that reach the tipping point see what's happening and decide they are ready or uncomfortable enough to make a change. For people who never reach the tipping point, I believe that they are still uncomfortable, clearly, still grieving, still struggling, but they've almost resigned themselves to that discomfort. And for them, it's just how it is, which breaks my heart for them. I hold them so tenderly in my heart. I see women posting in IVF groups or on Instagram, and they're like, I'm just biding my time. I just want to be happy, with the insinuation or the implication being that only a baby will make them happy, right? I even saw one woman post a question, how could I ever expect to be happy without a baby? And again, that just breaks my heart even more because one, it's a lot of pressure to put on a tiny baby, right? Your forever happiness is a lot of pressure to put on a tiny person who isn't even in the world yet. And number two, that means, and let's say that when you do get the baby and when you do inevitably experience sadness, unhappiness, or something like that, because it's a feeling and people experience these feelings all the time, it's natural and normal to experience them, you're probably going to villainize yourself by saying, I finally have the thing that I thought would make me happy and I'm still not happy, so what the hell's wrong with me? This is 100% me, okay? So the people that reach the tipping point decide that they are committed to the process and committed to themselves. The ones that never reach the tipping point have kind of convinced themselves that they have just been dealt this crap hand of cards and are just trying to muddle or white knuckle through. So I'm speaking to you. If you think you're at the tipping point, if you're nearing the tipping point, if you're flirting with the tipping point, if you are at the tipping point and not sure what the hell to do with it, I want to invite you to embrace the 1%. One of my coaching mentors, Cara Lowenthal, she calls it the infinite 1%. The most beautiful, meaningful, sustained changes that you can make in your life are made in 1% increments. Our brain does not want to believe this, not even a little bit. 1% doesn't feel like we're doing enough. If you remember a few months back, right as we were hitting around 100 episode, that benchmark, I did several episodes around perfectionism. Perfectionism wants you to believe that in order to make changes, that you're changing everything, broad sweeping changes. That in order for, let's say, working out to count, it has to be an hour of exercise 5 to 6 days per week at a high intensity. And that if you're concerned about egg quality, then you have to throw out all of your plasticware, all of your fragrances and candles, and spend $450,000 a month on supplements. That is the lie that we have been sold, and it is the story that our brains desperately cling to. So it's no wonder why it becomes so overwhelming for us, and we quickly revert back to our usual ways of behaving. Your brain wants to tell you that you have to be 100% in it to make changes stick. 1% seems too tiny, seemingly insignificant. But think about this. The difference between doing something and doing nothing is the biggest difference that there is. From 0 to 1 is exponential growth. Going from 0 to 1 is more than most people will do. Going from 0 to 1 is the hardest part. Once you go from 0 to 1, it's just rinse and repeat. In the words of Cara Lowenthal, rinse and repeat. Remember that your brain loves to save energy, and it's terrified to do anything new. Newton's first law of motion is that a body in motion will stay in motion, and a body at rest will stay at rest. What is hard is overcoming the inertia from 0 to get to 1. What is hard is being in a state of non-motion, a state of rest, and going into a state of motion. That's where you need to effort. That is the effort that you're putting into these things. When you want to take a new action, you have to get over the inertia of not being in motion to get in motion. But after you've done it once and you know how, in the words of Cara Lowenthal, you just rinse and repeat. When you want to stop taking a certain action you have a habit you're trying to break, the inertia is actually just getting to the point where you can repeat it. Just keep taking the same action and keep doing the same thing. And the effort is that you have to get over the inertia of just repeating the habit the same way you always do to change it or to be at rest, to get over being at rest, right? But after you have allowed the urge to not do something or to do the opposite of what you're wanting, you just rinse and repeat. The big difference in the world isn't between people who have done a little versus people who have done a lot. It's between people who do nothing and people who do something. And this is the tragedy of perfectionism, because perfectionism keeps us thinking that doing a little is pointless. But doing a little is everything. If you spend 5 minutes a day doing thought work, after a year, you will have spent 30 whole hours of working on your brain. 30 hours doesn't seem like a big number, but when you think about 30 hours, that's almost a week of a work, right? That you have done nothing else but work on your mind. If you don't spend those 5 minutes because it's too little and it doesn't count, a year later, you will have the exact same results that you do now. You will have gotten nowhere. A body at rest stays at rest. And a mind in chaos stays in chaos. Unless you use your energy to overcome that inertia, that first 1%. The exponential difference is not between you who are spending 5 minutes a day on thought work and someone who's spending an hour a day on thought work, which I don't know many people who do that, but you are actually closer to the person that does an hour's worth of thought work every day. The exponential difference is between both of you and someone who is not doing any thought work at all. When you are despairing about what you can do is not enough, you know that you aren't doing anything, right? You're not actually doing it. You're just sitting around thinking about how it's not enough, whatever you're doing, right? But if you believe the biggest difference in life was between those who do nothing and those who do little, then you'd have no excuse to not try, because you would understand the 1%, the brilliance of the 1%. And even doing that 1%, the difference between nothing and 1%, the difference between 1 minute and 1 hour, however you want to think about time and effort, the difference between nothing and 1% is exponential. It's incredible. It is everything. So no excuse to not try to do at least 1%. And that will change everything for you. So if you are at the tipping point, or you feel like you're nearing it, or maybe you've even passed it, but you're still not sure what to do, just choose one thing. Start with one thing that is sustainable, that you can do most days, that you will find some joy or happiness or motivation around. Whether it's journaling, going for a walk, meditation, yoga, listening to the podcast, applying different concepts from the podcast, practicing things I suggest, creating a gratitude list, seeking out counseling or coaching. No matter what you choose, know that it is enough and stick with it. Rinse and repeat. Remind yourself that 1% is huge, and it is sustainable and is perfect for you right now as you're learning to take care of yourself. Okay, that is what I have for you, my beautiful friends. Have a wonderful week, and I will talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of IVF This. If you like what you've heard, click subscribe and follow to make sure you don't miss an episode. And if you want to learn more, head over to www.ivfthiscoaching.com to learn how to work together.